if we hear about a new comet being discovered, or even a comet that might be observable in the sky for us to have a look at, we may come across a few different styles in which they can be named. So it may actually be a name, like Lovejoy, or it may be more like a code. So how are comets named? Now, first we're going to start with the actual current system that's in place for giving its kind of like a code name. And in 1994, the International Astronomical Union approved the current system which we use now to give it a kind of code or a name from the system. And here is a few examples there, and it's made up from letters and numbers basically, which can help you identify the kind of type of comet that it is, when it was discovered, and things like that. So it's quite useful in that sense. So how do they actually then come to that code name? Well, the part at the beginning denotes the type of comet that it is, and there's a few different types of comet that it can be. So it's not just a comet, there are kind of subcategories within that that can help determine what type of comet that it is, and that becomes at the front followed by a forward slash. So the first type refers to a periodic comet, or normally referred to as a short period comet, and these have orbital periods of 200 years or less. So it takes 200 years or less to go around the sun and then back around again. And it also might refer to a comet that has been observed more than once to pass the perihelion, which is the closest pass to the sun as it comes around. So it's been observed more than once, and that kind of makes sense that it has a fairly short orbital period, that we would see that multiple times. If it had a much longer orbital period, then the chances are we might not see that more than once anyway. So it's a short period comet, typically less than 200 years. If we go to the next type, that would be C, and that refers to a non-periodic comet. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is non-periodic, but it means it has an orbital period much greater than the 200 years previously. So this could be upwards of like a 1,000,000-year orbital period, and in that case there, we're not going to see that pass the perihelion multiple times. So it would likely have a very long orbital period, or it would have only been observed the once for passage. We'll just observe the once. An example here would be Comet Lovejoy, C 2007 E2, and has an orbital period approximately 50,000 years. It takes some time to go into the system and come back out. It's around about 50,000 years, and that would have originated much further out in the solar system. So that would have been located probably in the Oort cloud, which is a spherical structure at the outer part of the solar system, which is a collection of comet-like objects, and long-period comets are going to originate there. So this C likely denotes comets that come from there much further out. Now the X is for comets that have no reliable orbit. So these are mostly historical comets. So these are before telescopes were really used to make observations. There wasn't enough observations to get a reliable orbit, or they disintegrated or moved in the sky to an unfavourable location where follow-up observations couldn't be made. So there just wasn't enough information about these comets to get a reliable orbit, and these will be designated the X. An example here is the Great Comet of 1106. So it was called X 1106 C1. And actually what happened here was it disintegrated, and before it headed back out to the outer parts of the solar system. But the interesting thing here is it still returns as smaller fragments which are sun grazing. So these smaller fragments that it broke up to are kind of a group of comets now that graze the sun as they come into the inner part of the solar system, are known as sun grazers. Now the D refers to periodic comets that are broken up. So these are comets that have been broken up. They were known to be periodic comets, and a good example here is Shoemaker-Levy 9. That got very close to Jupiter and was pulled apart by its tides. It then impacted Jupiter actually. So this was an example of a periodic comet that then broke up, and it was called D 1993 F2. You also then have A. Now these are minor planets or asteroids that were originally mistaken to be a comet. And the reason for that might be that they had a comet-like orbit. So these were more elliptical shaped orbits compared to what an asteroid or minor planet might have. but these were not comets, but they were mistaken to be comets previously, so they would have been given the A designation. And then the final one is interstellar comets. So these are comets which have come from outside of our own solar system. So you have Oumuamua and you have Borisov. These are the only two that carry the I designation for comets because these have originated from outside the solar system. There's only those two that have that name so far. But the interesting thing here is they've actually been discovered in the last few years, which suggests that maybe they're not that uncommon. It's just they're the only two we've actually found. So these carry the I, and these are from outside of the solar system. And if we move away from the type now, so now that we've got the type of comet that it is, the middle number there is the year that the comet was discovered. So the example I've got here, that comet would have been discovered in 2022. So that's the year. We then move along to the next letter, and that designates the half month that the comet was discovered. So the months are split in half, and then in the first half it would be given a letter, and the second half it would get the next letter. Now the example here for this comet is that it would have been discovered in the first half of March of 2022. If you want the full kind of letters to the date, you can find it on the IAU website, and it gives you this here. Now, I think there's one or two letters that are missing out of the alphabet, but this is how they correspond to the half month. So the first one, A, would be January between the 1st and the 15th, and then the 16th to the 31st, you move to letter B as an example. So you can find out exactly what letter it picks up depending on the date it was discovered. And then the final number is the number of comet the number it was discovered in that month. So this one here would have been the third comet discovered in the first half of March 2022. So that gives you the full code from the current system that is being used for comets. Now, you will also note that some comets also carry a name as well. So the IAU routinely issues names for comets, and sometimes you'll see it as just purely a name, depending on maybe it's a fairly significant one, or you'll have the actual code, its name from the system, and then its name in brackets behind that. And the name that it's given is normally associated to the person who discovered it, or if it's like multiple people who have discovered it, it will carry a joint name. So this one here carries the name Lovejoy, which have been discovered by a person with the name Lovejoy. And thank you for watching, and if you enjoy, then check out some of the other videos.